The day I signed my marriage certificate to a man I'd never loved, everyone thought I'd given up. They had no idea what was coming. I grew up in a traditional South Asian household in Texas. When my parents died in a car accident 3 years ago, my Aunt Catherina became my legal guardian, even though I was 23 and technically an adult. But in our culture, an unmarried woman doesn't live alone. And my aunt made sure I understood that every single day. Aunt Catherina had always been controlling, but after my parents died, it got worse. She moved into our family home temporarily to help me grieve. That temporary stay became a permanent one. She took over everything, the finances, the household decisions, even my social life. Your parents would want you taken care of, she'd say. A woman alone brings shame to the family. I was too broken to fight back. I miss my parents so much that I just let her take control. For 2 years, I lived like a ghost in my own home. I worked as a graphic designer from home, and Aunt Catherina made sure I rarely left the house. She monitored my phone, my computer, my bank account. She said it was for my protection, but I knew better. It was about control. Then, 6 months ago, she made her announcement. "I found a suitable match for you," she said over dinner, like she was discussing the weather. "His name is Martins. He's 34, works in finance, very respectable family. You'll meet him next week." My stomach dropped. "I'm not interested in getting married." Her eyes went cold. "You don't have a choice. You're 26 years old, living in your parents' house, unmarried. Do you know what people say about you? About me for failing to find you a husband? I don't care what people say." "Well, I do. This family has a reputation. Your parents left you this house, but who do you think has been managing everything? Me. And I won't let you disgrace their memory by becoming a spinster." I tried to refuse. I really did. But Aunt Catherina had leverage I didn't realize she had. She'd been forging my signature on documents for months. She'd taken out a second mortgage on my parents' house, the house that was supposed to be mine, and owed over $80,000 to some very questionable people. People who were now threatening legal action. "You cooperate with this marriage, and Martin's family will pay off the debt," she said calmly. "His parents are eager for the match. They're willing to settle your financial troubles as part of the dowry arrangement." "You mean your financial troubles? I never took out that loan." She smiled. "Try proving that. Your signature is on everything. And if this goes to court, you'll lose the house anyway. At least this way, you'll have a husband to take care of you." I felt trapped. Completely, utterly trapped. I met Martins the following week. He was fine. Polite, educated, boring. But there was something off about him. He barely looked at me during our introduction, and when he did, there was no warmth. No interest. Just obligation. After he left, I overheard Aunt Catherina on the phone with his mother. "Yes, she's very obedient. No boyfriends, I've made sure of that. The house? Once they're married, we can discuss transferring the deed." That's when I understood. This wasn't about marriage. This was about stealing my inheritance. Martin's family would pay off the fake debt, I'd marry him, and somehow my house, my parents' house, would end up in their control. And knowing my aunt, she'd get a cut for facilitating the whole thing. I pretended to go along with it. I smiled at wedding planning meetings. I nodded when Aunt Catherina picked out my dress. I acted like the obedient niece she'd always wanted. But secretly, I was planning. First, I contacted my parents' old lawyer, Mr. Chen. I explained everything, the forged signatures, the second mortgage, the forced marriage arrangement. He was horrified. "Maya, this is fraud. We need to act fast." He helped me file a police report and worked with the bank to freeze any further transactions on the house. Turns out, some of those signatures were sloppy enough that a handwriting expert could prove they weren't mine. Second, I reached out to my cousin Zainab, Aunt Catherina's own daughter, who'd cut contact with her mother 5 years ago. I'd always wondered why. When I told her what was happening, she wasn't surprised. She did the same thing to our grandmother, Zainab said bitterly. Convinced her to sign over her property, then stuck her in a nursing home. I tried to warn the family, but no one believed me. Zainab agreed to testify about Aunt Catherina's history of financial manipulation. Third, I did something risky. I contacted Martins directly, without my aunt knowing. We met at a coffee shop, and I asked him straight out, "Do you even want to marry me?" He looked relieved that I'd asked. God, no. No offense, but this whole thing was my parents' idea. They're obsessed with getting me married, and your aunt made it sound like you were desperate to settle down. I'm not. And I'm pretty sure both our families are using us. I told him about the house, the debt, the whole scheme. His face went pale. My parents gave your aunt $50,000 as an advance on the dowry, he said slowly. They told me it was standard, but now you realize they're all in on it together. We made a plan. Martins would play along until the wedding, and I'd do the same. But on the day of the ceremony, we'd both expose everything. The wedding day arrived. It was held at a banquet hall with 300 guests, mostly Aunt Catherina's friends and distant relatives I'd never met. She'd gone all out, spending money she didn't have on a wedding I didn't want. I wore the red and gold lehenga she'd chosen. I smiled for photos. I let the makeup artist paint my face. And then, right before the ceremony was supposed to start, I took the microphone. "Thank you all for coming," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "But there isn't going to be a wedding today." The hall went silent. Aunt Catherina's face turned white, then red. "Maya, what are you doing?" "I'm exposing the truth." I pulled out a folder of documents. 6 months ago, my aunt forged my signature to take out an $80,000 loan against my parents' house. She then arranged this marriage to Martins, whose family agreed to pay off that debt as part of a dowry, essentially selling me to cover her fraud. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "That's a lie!" Aunt Catherina shrieked. "She's having a breakdown, she doesn't know what she's saying. I have bank records, handwriting analysis, and a police report that was filed 2 weeks ago." I turned to Martins. "Would you like to share your part?" Martin stepped forward, looking uncomfortable but determined. My parents gave Catherina $50,000 before the wedding, supposedly as tradition. But my father let it slip that after the marriage, Maya's house would be transferred to our family's name. This whole thing was a real estate scam disguised as a marriage arrangement. Chaos erupted. Martin's parents were shouting, Aunt Catherina was crying and denying everything, and guests were either filming on their phones or rushing toward the exits. Mr. Chen, my lawyer, stood up from where he'd been sitting in the back. "There are police officers outside ready to take statements. Catherina Malik, you're going to want to speak with them." I watched my aunt's face crumble as everything she'd built fell apart. Part of me felt bad, she was still family. But mostly, I felt free. The aftermath was messy. Aunt Catherina was charged with fraud and forgery. She tried to claim she'd done it for my own good, but the evidence was overwhelming. She ended up with probation and was ordered to pay restitution. Martins and I stayed in touch, actually. We became friends, bonding over our shared experience of family manipulation. He eventually came out to his parents as gay, which explained a lot about his reluctance to marry. Last I heard, he'd moved to California and was much happier. The house was cleared of all fraudulent debt. I still live there, in my parents' home, but now it truly feels like mine. Some family members cut me off, saying I humiliated Aunt Catherina publicly and should have handled it privately. But Zainab told me something that stuck with me: people who operate in the shadows hate being exposed to light. You did the right thing. I'm still single, still living alone, and still perfectly happy. I run my graphic design business, I make my own decisions, and I answer to no one. And I learned something important: sometimes the biggest act of rebellion is refusing to be a victim.